Welcome back, one and all, to the new database episode 2.0. Lots to talk about. It's been a month, give or take, since my last one, so let's get into it. And the first thing is market consolidation, Microsoft's layoffs, technology, all those things that are all going wrong. So with the layoffs announced from Microsoft again this year, 10,000 is a huge number, even for a company as big as Microsoft. But the story not really discussed here is what this actually means, and that Microsoft have often done this. So when they purchased Nokia quite a few years ago, they cut almost double that figure. So again, it's a cost-cutting exercise because of consolidation. And obviously market forces, they need profits. So a big reason for this will be the Activision acquisition, as they aim to appease shareholders ahead of that acquisition, if it happens anytime soon, and that's no guarantee, and therefore reduce the bleeding of profits. Their annual report highlighted the strong and weak areas they have, and Xbox is sitting in that lower end yet again, dropping 13% over last year, and this is no supply issues. It doesn't help when they launch any exclusive games, as I've already covered. But the big issue is the golden egg of Windows is also falling faster than anything at the moment, both in home and office from laptops and server-based. Now, if it were not for the Microsoft Azure and the cloud growth they've got, the latest financial reports could have been much, much worse. And remember, revenue is not profit. And this is what they need, and explains some of these actions, and it's backed up by them finally following Sony and cutting the huge wasted cost of an E3 event. As I said would happen back in my 2019 video or 2018 video, they need to drive profit, and expensive talk pieces and glamour will not do it. Sadly though, one of the biggest hits in the gaming division within Microsoft is them sunsetting their never fully realised VR and AR departments in HoloLens, which highlights another broken promise, and one as a huge advocate of VR and AR as I am, is very disappointing to me, more so to the hundreds of employees and maybe even thousands that are now hunting for a new role. Now, continuing the cuts is recently acquired Bethesda. They've also had to let staff go, and again, this wouldn't have happened without the consolidation. This is the price of consolidation, always. And it's a point that I keep banging on about in regards to much of the business world in the past 20 years. This impact continues to 343, but that was needed anyway, as I always thought it was a portfolio management cost center anyway. Badly managed, as I discussed in my Halo Infinite reveal video. This was not a full studio, in my opinion, so to speak at least, with its over-reliance on contract work for a start, and incredibly bad delivery results, or lack thereof really. And all of this leads to my point here, which is they are again going to cut costs further and drop the Slipspace engine and move to UE5 at the cost of, I would assume, a big portion of work in progress that will never see the light of day. And as I discussed with CG Projekt moving to UE5 also, this is all about cost reduction, cost consolidation, talent pool picking and minimising risk. But the biggest cost comes in the form of progression and pioneering. As the market all moves to a smaller variety of studios, publishers, teams and technologies, we will simply see more and more homogenization of gaming development, and that makes me sad. If we look back at the years of all the innovation, the consistent area is individuality, be that singular or plural. Just talking games, computers, consoles, then without this need to improve, shape, pioneer and be different, we would not have seen the Spectrum, the VIC-20, the 64, the SID chip specifically, the Apple, the Amiga, the VCS, the ST, the Mega Drive, the PC Engine, the Game Boy, Model 1 through 3 Arcade, Neo Geo, PS1, Saturn, Dreamcast, PS2 and more. But from a purely games and technology perspective, then forget all about your Mario Brothers, your pole positions, your Virtua Racers, the vast European demo scene in the 80s and 90s. Goodbye Doom and NXGtech, Quake, GoldenEye from Rare, and one of the biggest leaps in generations in technology with Hideo Kojima's and the team's magnum opus Metal Gear Solid 2, which even now sports bigger technological leaps in many areas and interaction than almost all modern titles. Truly sad. I could go on, but here the result is more that the market convergence and consolidation, the more stale, predictable and repetitive it will all become. As a keen stalwart for all things new, fresh, out of the box thinking and pioneering, this only fills me with dread. Luckily though, we do have light ahead with other companies still pushing untapped areas and making new markets, but as I discussed a few months back with the Activision acquisition, nothing good really comes from this and only comes to benefit one or a few people. New owners, new shareholders. It can be hard for many watching this to know what it was like to be in the early 80s when much of the market was sparking into life, but it seemed that not a week or a month went by without a new piece of hardware, computer, game, experience or new idea was thrust onto the market. Game genres weren't even formed, and without the need to keep stakeholders in the profit, risks were and could be taken. As I always say to my wife, take out the risk and you take out the fun. I'm thankful for companies such as PlayStation, Nintendo, Valve and many others that continue to try new things and invest in areas of risk, basically. Long may that continue and thrive, but I do get a little worrisome around the amount of consolidation going on from a technical perspective in a lot of the gaming market currently. So on to more positive news, I think. I thought the new Microsoft Direct was great, the developer Direct, and it was well needed from Xbox to actually acknowledge their market and give gamers something to be excited for. Forza continues to be a tentpole title for Microsoft, and driving games never lose their flair, and also really help drive many technological leaps, as I just discussed. So not least of this would be a perfect fit for this title in VR, had Microsoft stuck to that path that they promised. But I am still looking forward to seeing more on this, and the demo here was certainly enough to get us petrol heads sitting forward. I was also overjoyed with Hi-Fi Rush dropping the same day it was announced. I'm a huge fan of this, and I've mentioned it before, and it takes me back to the good old days when you knew little of a game until you saw it on the shelf or a month out in a preview magazine. I did jump on and play the title. The animation style, the Guitar Hero meets Devil May Cry come Jet Set Radio gameplay is fun, and certainly fresher than the constant barrage of Pixar-like CGI that had become the norm of late. That said though, I do think the Western influences in the game are still quite strong. The hints and tutorials are one that actively reduced my enthusiasm as it impacted the flow of the game. I would have loved for it to just let you play, die and learn without a hint option at all, or at least having that to turn it on and off in the menu, rather than the levels being designed with such simplicity in mind. But I get games need to expand to all audiences, but adding in a lower level of entry shouldn't come at the cost of us more experienced gamers who want a challenge. It's not just that this game is guilty, because by any means most games do this nowadays, which is quite frustrating, but it is an area that pushed me out whilst I was playing, and much of this seems at odds with the Tango Works style. It is fun, it's a light action title, and it really is the perfect example of a game on Game Pass in my opinion. The production values, although great, are more aligned to the cost and return that subscription model requires. And that said, it is great to get an Xbox exclusive out there. And the Direct Showcase on the road, let's hope that they can stick to this now and continue the rollout of new games, new updates, new exclusives over a set period of time so it keeps that momentum on Xbox going. And it gives us all a reason to get excited about it, because it has been a very dry 18 months, give or take. More good news. Updates dropping from PlayStation this time, keeping the PS5's firmware up to date. Excuse me. The latest beta added quite a few nice and welcome features, and I'm a big fan of these upgrades that have come to the operating systems at launch, or since launch really. But a big boost for me is now VRR. It supports 1440p output, which is great, as that can now run VRR on a 1440p screen, and for me that means testing titles that support VRR, such as the latest Hogwarts Legacy, which seems to have more output modes than you can shake a stick at. Apologies, I'm going to cough. They've also improved the 1440p support, so if you could not run 1440p before on your PS5 and your screen or monitor, it may actually now work, so do try it. VRR though still requires a HDMI 2.1 input though, so in addition to this, the latest firmware also now offers operating system integration from PS4 to PS5 saves via your PS Plus cloud save download for cross-generation titles. You can now update your DualSense, both the new and the old, with the firmware updates wirelessly. And like I say, it also adds an update to the DualSense Edge, which I reviewed a couple of weeks back on my channel. And it also updates the UI, it adds Discord chat, other tweaks and improvements. I don't think this will be public by the time the PSVR 2 launches, but I assume it will come out sometime around May-ish, and it may include some of these, none of these features, but for one, I am happy that a few of them have dropped, and they do help a great deal both in practicality and portability, and the wider 1440p support is most welcome because there will be more screens on the market that support this resolution, and obviously with 120Hz frame rates, all of that means there'll be more TVs that you can plug your PS5 into and get the benefit from it, which that 1440p I think is a great middle ground. I must call out the fact that Xbox had it at launch. That is one area where they definitely did well there. Updates, more updates. Witcher 3. Yeah, after my dual coverage of the Witcher 3 ray trace updates on PC and console, I ended the updates where they were excellent overall, but the quality and performance cost was not always a fair trade. And the things removed from the PC version, as I covered, such as the HBO Plus, they were not really a great look, in my opinion. Both Series X and PS5 suffered across both modes, with the PS5 affected more in the ray trace mode, and the Series X affected more in the performance mode, and the Series S certainly as well. And overall, no version was actually great, including PC. And as I detailed in those videos, much of the issues comes from the DX11 to 12 wrapper, the API impacts, and general split work needed across all these platforms. Again, I don't know where they are with their DX11 to 12 wrapper, but it was certainly an issue at launch, whether it's fixed now or not. But the update does look to have reduced the ray count and ranges, as I discussed in that video, would be a good option. And it is the best choice, in my opinion, to maximise performance with a small reduction in precision, but the CPU cost is still sky high. It doesn't really utilise the threads of modern CPUs that well, and it can be very single or dual thread bound often, just as I covered back then. So it still carries over to the console versions, in my opinion. Anyway, it's great they did some updates to this version, but I assume this will be the last we will see of this title now in regards to updates. And now the team are probably focused on remaking the first title in Unreal Engine 5 anyway, so we can start looking to the whole journey restarting again in a new engine, rebooted the series only after 15 years. Again, I like reboots. I've just talked about one. I'll talk about one in a minute, but I do wish that we would have more new games than remakes all the time and reboots, but I'll reserve judgment to see what that comes out like. But again, it's consolidation. Here we go, Unreal Engine 5. So, keeping with the theme of reboots and updates, I did cover the latest Dead Space remake before launch across PC and console, and even the Steam Deck over on IGN. Then only a few days later, the team dropped a patch for the VRS issues, or really the removal of VRS, as it was overkill on PlayStation 5 Series X and mid to high-end PCs and Series S, as I surmised. Now, I did cover this on the day it came out, and a little later on the Series X and S have now got VRR removed. Just like the PS5, as I covered then, you can see here my quick update on it. The visual quality was not as badly affected on the Series X than the PS5, but the IQ was still lower than required and softer overall with it enabled. You can now actually see that the old Series X version is now worse than the new Series S version. So that gives you an idea of the soft textures. And that was one of the areas that was different. So the image quality certainly stood out more because it had almost like a checkerboard artifact on PS5, whereas on the Series X and Series S, which is very soft and muddy, a lot of the time the textures were much sharper on PS5. And you can see examples of that here, comparing them all. So they're far more in line now. They're almost exactly the same. And the game had it removed, really, because the IQ was too low. FSR2 does a great job across all three formats, and aligned with the general dark image quality the game targets and the high contrast look they go for from light to dark. They all work pretty well to present a clean and relatively sharp image, even if they heavily rely on the reconstruction element to hit the relevant ceilings of 1440 and 4K across the two modes, with the Series S often being the lowest IQ, as it seems to always be under 1080p. With VRS now removed, though, at least this improves the detail on textures and filtering, which was quite bad on the launch version at times, again, as you can see, but specifically due to those blurry textures more than anything else. The cutscenes already had VRR disabled anyway before this update, so only gameplay really benefits from the update, but it's great to see, and this update is excellent, an excellent remake, and one that I rank alongside Resident Evil 2 from Capcom as one of the best remakes I've played, and I'm a big fan of the entire genre anyway. The other thing they've changed the gamma output, and also they've improved the actual contrast. So before it used to move in chunks of 5 on consoles, and now it goes down like PC and individuals. So they've definitely changed some of that gamma curve in terms of the darkness. It's slightly darker by default now. Even the brightest is brighter in the old version than it is in the new version, and you've got a finer grain control of the brightness now in the newer version. So that is all pretty good in terms of updates. They've definitely had a look at this and made sure they tweak it as much as they possibly can. But it also gives us a good talking point around remakes, and it does, like I say, the game looks excellent, and it cannot be argued that in terms of gameplay itself, flow, story, it definitely beats and is better than the Callisto Protocol in almost all areas. But from a visual and technical perspective, the gap between the remake and Callisto Protocol is huge. Image quality, IQ, it can look generational at times from character models, animations, materials, lighting, and again, even that stability of image. Here you can see it on the Xbox One S compared to the Series X, and the PS5, it doesn't really make any difference. So the remake is great. It's a great game, don't get me wrong, but it's a good balance between what is good as a game and what is good as a technical showcase. And Callisto Protocol simply wins out here. And I simply love me horror, I love me science fiction, so therefore these two games coming back to back from December to January was a rare treat for me, and it's only going to be improved next month with another classic being remade and hitting a village near us all soon. But again, this does bring me back to too many remakes in such a short space of time. We're just having too many repeats of our nostalgia. But again, I love Resident Evil, so I am looking forward to what they can do with RE4. It has the opportunity here to be the very best remake Capcom have made thus far, but we'll wait and see. I think the final subject I'll talk about is new tech, the new Switch specs and announcements. So I did want to get into this I think it's getting close, because all the talk of new generation hardware always gets our technical bones tingling, and with Nintendo long since dancing the rhythm of their own drum, they've not followed the rules since the start really, and they've always managed to create new avenues, ideas and even platforms with the Game Boy and certainly the original hybrid in the Switch. With the mighty handheld becoming 6 years old this year, and I think that by next year we will have a new replacement for this epic little hit. And although everyone seems to be talking about what it may power it and mostly getting very optimistic, over-optimistic, I believe that always happens, I don't actually believe we will see the big N striving into new territory on that score, but they will be striving into new territory. I do think this will be announced this year sometime, maybe around June, September-ish. I don't believe they'll move away from the hybrid design, but instead expand on it. The Tegra 239 seems to be a common and I believe accurate leak on the system on a chip that will power it, and as I discussed many years ago now over on Red Gaming Tech's channel with Paul and Matt Harger, that the new Switch would embrace DLSS technology and is likely going to be Ampere based with ray tracing support, but expect that to be similar to the ray tracing support of the Steam Deck, maybe plus minus 15%, probably plus. I also expect similar pure GPU performance around the PS4 levels, maybe slightly above it with a more capable 8-core CPU, again ARM based and with more RAM and an SSD, and more importantly, I think they may go further on options here. I think 4K DLSS supported as a dock-in option to your screen is almost a given, and I also think that VR may be an area that Nintendo push on with this new hybrid. I think that's one area of expansion, potentially even AR and VR. Bringing back the options they had with the 3DS, integrating a camera. There's a lot of things they could do here. And the thing is, that Labo Cardboard VR was generally a success. And it's certainly an area that the new console could compete in, and certainly in the same space with the Meta Quest 2, with it being a full standalone VR device that could actually exceed the quality of the Meta, with a simple drop-in HMD, so it enables this hybrid to be the master of all trades. The upgraded CPU, the DLSS 2 integration, maybe even DLSS 3, newer APIs will work perfectly with the VR demands, and being ARM based will also mean that porting from the Quest 2 to this will be so much easier. And it could even have some big leaps over that one, because it could generally be more powerful than the actual SoC that's inside that machine. I'm not saying it is, but there's the potential there. And it could actually compete in that price range, with it potentially having a cheap option such as the cheap Labo VR HMD headset, so you could just get it working with your screen, just drop it straight in and use that as you play around with it, again all based on weight and stuff. But even better quality headset that ships, and again I think they're going to target £300, maybe £400 range, and this could be the next big hit from Nintendo, although they do actually have to get over their curse that landed since the launch of the N64. But I always look forward to what Nintendo will release, and certainly how their own first parties make software that capitalises on the promise of the hardware early on. So fingers crossed we get news in the next 6 months or so, and we can find out just what they've been cooking in their workshop. And that's it. I did want to do some Q&A, but I've only really got one question, so I'll come back to Q&A. So if you are a patron, please give me any Q&A on the channel over on the Patreon site, and I will add them to my next database. There wasn't enough here for me to add another Q&A on this one, so apologies for that. Hopefully this quick catch-up with news and information and all things technology was enjoyable and not too waffly and short enough. 20 minutes, I think that's enough to listen to me waffle on. I'm sure my wife would agree. Anyway, I'm out, but I'll see you all very soon on the next one. Obviously, as always, if you can, share, like, subscribe, comment down below, all that stuff. Hate saying it, but it does really help me out. And obviously check out all my other content. So some stuff over on IGN. You've got Forspoken on PS5, Forspoken on PC and Steam Deck, which again, that game obviously has a terrible launch, didn't do very well, and it definitely has its issues. But running it on the Steam Deck shows that it does scale quite well, albeit with the issues. But go and check that out over on IGN, obviously Dead Space as well. And obviously my review of the DualSense Edge. Did you pick one up? Are you looking to pick one up? Does it even tickle your fancy bone in terms of wanting to use something that costs £200? As great as it is, it certainly has a cost that comes with it. But again, if you know that that's what you want, then it will certainly make a lot of sense. Anyway, I'm out, but I'll catch you very soon on the next one.